In this video, I will discuss why I believe the future of decentralized AI is now almost completely secured and why this matters. To fully understand the reason why this matters, you first need to understand the risks of a centralized AI system. Centralized AI here refers to when a small minority of organizations and countries control the development, deployment, and access of AI. Development of AI is that they control in which direction you can bring the AI and the next step in research and in development. The deployment of AI is that they control how it's deployed, and so which strategies. Is it with an application? Is it on a mobile app? Is it on in other form factors? So when they control that. The access is where they control what is your rate limit, how much you can use it, with which types of questions you can use it, and from which country you can use it. And so until now, we were in a situation where it was mostly OpenAI and then a few other companies that were nowhere near in market size that were the only one doing this decision on how do we develop, deploy, and limit access to their models. And as AI become increasingly powerful and pervasive, it become quite obvious that this centralization of AI into the hands of a few, like OpenAI, is quite a bad idea. The risks associated with such a centralization of AI are those associated first with now that there are a few points of failures. Second is that you have possibilities of censorship and bias in the hands of a few. And then you also have inequities and access to a lot of data by only a few. And there is a lack of transparency and auditability. So if there is only a few, you don't have the choice, and they don't really have incentives to open up and to let you in on their data and the things they're doing, because there's not enough competitions. They can just control everything. In contrast, decentralized AI is when AI is distributed in the hand of many actors. And here we're referring to having, in this decentralized AI world, we would be having open source model. We can have models running locally, and the development can be community driven. This will mitigate and reduce a lot of the risks mentioned above. And so in a decentralized AI world, you would have a lot of different model providers and a lot of different people running the AI model. And so there's no single point of failure anymore. The second step is one that is about bias and transparency. So if you have a certain organization, a certain country, or whatever group you want to choose that have a specific bias, well, you can take your own open source model and you can fine tune it and you can give it a different bias. This will have the effects of increasing the diversity of models all across the world. And I really believe in the efficiency and usefulness of diversity. This is what we are seeing through evolution in nature. Usually a specialized animal would win in its specific niche. This also provides enhanced transparency and auditability, because now the models weight, you can even research on them. You can try to look at different correlations between different things. You can really try to start going into the black box. There is some work from Anthropic where they talk about explainable AI, but why leave that in the hands of just a few, 2 or 3 groups? In this world of decentralized AI, there is also a clear gain for security and privacy, because now you can lock down your computer and you don't have to send any data anywhere. You can just keep them on the same server and have that server process your data. There is also potential for a certain democratization of AI in terms of now you're able to run the model locally, although most times you're paying kind of barely at the limit of compute costs, and so you're not really kind of getting cheaper AI access right now. At this point, you're maybe getting potential and availability now to run those models and to distill them into smaller model, and then the access is increased. But the other part of access that is increased is that now it's not 2, 3, 4, 5 groups that decides whether you are worthy of using their AI or not. You would have access to those AI through thousands and thousands of AI providers. Now, the great news is that with the recent release back in July of the Llama 3 family model released by Meta, and now continued with the DeepSeek V3 and DeepSeek R1 released open source by DeepSeek, the company, we are almost certain that all of the barrier to decentralized AI have been overcome. Now, given that DeepSeek and Meta have used a very permissive license, the user and developers can now modify and distribute those models, making it virtually certain that we now have a world of a decentralized distribution of those models. As a matter of fact, there is a lot of examples of different users that are already right now using Llama and DeepSeek on their own local computer, completely disconnected from the internet. Now the question is, are those new models and those open source models released by Meta and DeepSeek, and by the way, there are a lot more, so there's Mistral, there's Quen, and there's Athene, there's a lot of more. Are these models in the same tier of intelligence as those proprietary systems? And so the best way to compare the intelligence of all of those models would be to run them all together side by side. And so this is obviously not a good prompt, but it's a little funny to ask them, show me your intelligence. But this is a lot of work and you don't always want to do that work. And so we are relying on the second best option and the only real one that we know. And those are benchmarks. Benchmarks have a lot of trade-offs and they are not going to test everything. They are not going to test all of the ways that you are prompting and that you are interacting with the models. But still, it's a good, it gives you a good ballpark for the intelligence of the models. There are lots of benchmarks I don't trust and I don't use because they have not put the models in the ranking that my personal experience would put those models. And so I tend to like the models that would give a good ranking to Sonnet 3.5 because this was the first model that really, for me, like changed the level of intelligence. I'm gonna go through 3 benchmarks here with the goal of seeing does the best models from Meta, let's say Llama, and does the best model from DeepSeek, are they actually really high on the benchmarks? And so one of the benchmark I like to look at is AidanBench. And you can see here on the top that you have Cloud Sonnet and that no open source model are better than Cloud Sonnet. But I actually rather look at this line of Cloud Sonnet because this is the one we all fell in love back in June. And so here we have DeepSeek R1 that performs better than this Cloud Sonnet 3.5 model. And this is a big deal. And so now we do have this demonstration in at least this benchmark that we have an open source model that performs better than some very high state-of-the-art model. Now let's move on to another benchmark so that we have lines of evidence from more than one source. And so the other one I like to look at is this Lmarena.ai, but I only like to look at one column, the hard prompts with style control. And we can see here from this one again that Cloud Sonnet performs really, really well, the version back in October. And so is there an open source model that is better than that? Yes, there's one, Deepseek R1. The other thing we can look at are the models from Meta, which some of the best ones were released back in July, and then they made some improvement throughout the time. And we have open source models here, like we have DeepSeek v3, and we also have Athene v2 chat, and we have here the Llama 405 billion parameters. And so then a little lower than that, at some point we get to also Llama 3.370b. And so this 70b is also something that we should talk about, because some of you may argue that, yes, well, is it really decentralized and made more accessible if you need $200,000 of compute to run those models? And this type of demand on the computer would apply to DeepSeek R1 if you want to have a very standard type of generation speed. DeepSeek R1 has been used to create a whole R1 series of models from 1B to 70B. And 70B model is something that you can run at something around 10 tokens per second on a single high-end consumer-grade GPU. So if we look at it in that aspect, if we say like, okay, like we have a 70B model that is in the top, let's say 15, and this is runnable on high-end consumer device, this is very, very impressive and very good. Another thing to keep in mind as we are predicting whether the future of decentralized AI is secured is that a trend that will continue? will we see more smaller model being more and more intelligent and using larger model to distill that into smaller model? And this trend seems to be a very, very strong one. The last benchmark that we can touch on is this simple benchmark. And here again, we can see that Claude Sonnet performs in the way that I would expect. Let's look at our other Claude Sonnet. Where is it right now? Well, it's right here. And again, it is right just under DeepSeek R1. And so there seemed to be quite a clear consensus that DeepSeek R1 is really getting into that top tier. Is it the best in the world? Probably not. But can you right now take that model and like change the ways you're working and have a true, very powerful assistant with you? Yes, you can. I think we can now declare that, in fact, we do have open source models that compete and that are in the same tier of intelligence as the proprietary ones. But, you know, some may claim, no, decentralized AI is not yet here. And one argument would be that there's still a high compute cost to run those models. And this is true for those Deepseek R1, that is the one at the top of the benchmarks I was showing you from the open source world. You do need like $100,000 or $200,000 to buy that type of compute to run it at a very competitive speed. Although keep in mind that $100,000 or $200,000, this is just the price of a high-end car that many people are buying. And so is it that limiting? No, not that much. But also the good news is that there are models in the tier just below, but that are very, very close to top tier. And those are the 70B models, and those can be run on high-end consumer device. And then from that, there are even smaller models that are still pretty good. Like right now, there is a model that is a 24B that is, according to the different benchmarks, I would say is very similar to the performance that we had GPT-4 back in the days. If that's the case, you know, GPT-4 was enough and smart enough, intelligent enough to be really, really exciting and really useful to many people. Now we have that in a 24B type of model. You can run that model without GPUs. I'd like also to note that at lower token rate, there are some people that are able to run the big DeepSeek model with only $2,000 to $6,000 of compute. So if you're still here after this video, you might be interested in hearing a little bit of my crazy prediction. My crazy prediction is that training-based model is now over. I think that Llama 3.3 and DeepSeek R1 have learned the fundamentals of language well enough that in the future, anything will just be fine-tuned. There's no reason to restart the work from scratch where you have such a good and MIT licensed open model out there. So be it the big companies or be it any other smaller companies, now anybody can go at it from this starting point. And so if you had many different organizations at different levels, like there was one that they invested $100 million and now they had this model that they could take on and do fine tunes on top. And there are those other organizations that didn't have that. And so they had to find that $100 million to get to that point. Well, they don't have to do that anymore. Now with DeepSeek R1, we have all that being brought to the same level. And so anybody can now go and do some fine tunes in different directions. That means that we will not have that need for those very, very big compute centers to create those foundational models. Although I'm not saying that we will not need those big compute centers at all, because one of the ways that you can create a very, very performant specialized model in one field is to have all of those models do a lot of compute to create a lot of a synthetic data set that you can now use to fine-tune the model. But the training part of that model will be much smaller, and it will be a lot more about creating the data set. Let me know what you think about that prediction in the comment, and let me know if you see any risks about decentralization of AI. And so on that, if you liked it, please go subscribe, give me a like. My name is Max. Have a good one.